Coming up on 60 Minutes.
The freedom of the seas is under threat.
A show of force in the Pacific.
Launch an aircraft, shoot them.
Unlike the world has ever seen.
It's as frightening as it is exhilarating.
But will China get the message?
Doesn't really matter in a real war situation.
Hello again and welcome to our Extra Minutes podcast. My name is Dimity Clancey and joining me today I have our producer extraordinaire and also a very dear friend of mine, Natalie Clancy. And we have just returned from quite the assignment overseas. This was a story that Natalie worked on for many months, actually. And I think when you look at the exercise like RIMPAC, you realise just how much planning actually needs to go into it. And this was one of our assignments. So tell me, Natty, why did you want to do this story?
Well, I think it's a classic picture story, which is, you know, what TV is all about. You want good shots and you want to get you as the reporter in there amongst the action. And it allowed us to do that. But I guess putting the adventure of it to one side, there's also a really important story there about sort of peace and security in the Pacific in our region. And it's a really good way to tell that story visually.
Absolutely. And I think once we got there, we could really see that underlying tone of what it was all about.
Totally. And I think all the people who we met who work in the military had that sort of real adventurous spirit about them and were clearly having a lot of fun, but also, you know, really understood deeply that there was a really serious side to their work. And I think that's probably the type of balance that we tried to strike in telling the story, even though it was really exciting.
And let's talk about it. So we were on an aircraft carrier, we were in a live fire situation. How do you get all of those elements across the line and how does all of that come about?
I feel like I'm in the hot seat being interviewed by a 60 Minutes reporter. I think it just takes, I guess, you know, good relationships and being honest with people about what you want. And I think we probably learnt too while we were away that sometimes saying no to things is just as important as saying yes in making sure they're things that are going to work for us and work for them in terms of telling the story.
Well, we were so close to guns going off. You know, we were so close to fighter jets rumbling down that runway on the ship. It's a huge level of trust that I guess you have to build with the media team for the military, to know that you're going to do the right thing, they're going to do the right thing, and to get us that access. I mean, I think for this story, access was everything.
Absolutely. And I think too that probably helped that we'd done a few stories last year with the US military. One about the nuclear-powered submarines that Australia's getting and another one about an exercise in the South China Sea. So I think they had got to see how we operate, and obviously we travel as a group of four, so we had the cameraman Scott Morelli and the sound recorder Matt Brown with us. And I think probably after one day or even, you know, 1 hour or 10 minutes of shooting, the people who we were with could see, hopefully, that we were professionals and that we took it seriously and, you know, we were going to follow every safety instruction and all of that. So I think, you know, there's only so much trust you can build before you turn up, but once you're there and they just get our, you know, friendly, fun-loving vibe, it all sort of fell into place because you do have that trust both ways.
And we had to be quite the team, didn't we? Because you were in those situations. But I will stress that some of what happened, we're going to talk about the adventure now because I think that this is what this is all about. And people want to know that when you're capturing a story like that, what are you actually seeing, feeling, thinking and living? But some of it is classified, but we will be sharing some things with people today.
Who decides what's classified and what's not?
we do it as we go.
Okay. I was going to say that, you know, obviously we always work as a team of four, but on an assignment like this, it's kind of a new level because you spend all your time together, you know, staying overnight on a ship. We were bunk buddies, the two boys were bunk buddies, so there's really no escape and you have to sort of know each other well and be able to pick up just from someone's face, like that person needs a toilet break, he needs a drink of water, we need to stop just for 5 seconds so, you know, that person can sort of regather themselves. And I think that's what helps it run smoothly too.
Absolutely. And the week kind of really kicked in and started, well, for me and I guess everyone, as we were approaching, we caught the helicopter. It was a 1 hour ride off the coast of Hawaii in a chopper.
What did you think when you saw the ship for the first time?
I thought it looks mean, but it just also looked beautiful. And I think that was because it was like this dot in the huge Pacific Ocean, and you got such a great view of the Hawaiian coast when we took off, but then also it was just ocean for as far as you could see for probably 3/4 of the flight. And then suddenly, you saw the pilot go, waving his arm saying, it's over there. And then you looked out, and I just remember seeing it just looked vicious, but it was also a really beautiful sight. And as we kind of got lower and landed, and then you saw all of the aircraft, it was like a car park for planes. And that's when my adrenaline started to kick in, and I thought, here we go, this story's starting now.
And I think too, when you land on that aircraft carrier, you have so much adrenaline because of the sound and the heat, and you sort of can't believe you're there. But then you just have to sit still.
Yeah.
Like they tell you, don't get out of the harness until someone comes and tells you. So you're just sort of trapped there, full of all of this energy, with all these people buzzing around you, making sure
rubbing off our pelican cases.
That's it, and chaining the helicopter
and
down and all of this. And we're just like sitting there wanting to get out, but you're kind of stuck, And there's a few moments like that, I think, in this story where you sort of like what you're doing is totally out of your control. You're at the mercy of the people in charge, but you sort of can't help how you feel.
And then I actually remember when we first went inside the ship, I remember thinking, this is really dingy. Like this is, I don't know whether I was thinking it was going to be.
This is one of the finest military machines in the world.
I know.
Are you sure it's dingy?
It wasn't. I did
mean.
think that. And then I guess I hadn't really thought in my head that the entire time we were going to go up and down ladders. I mean, you as a producer could tell me 1,000 times, but I don't think I ever really... it didn't compute that that's what we were going to do.
And it was a 17-story building, basically, at sea with vertical ladders to go up and down. So it was definitely a workout, but, we got our steps up and...
Yeah, we did. And that walking out onto that flight deck for the very first time, the smell was like a mechanic's shop. I just remember thinking I could just smell the fuel. And it was just so busy. There were a gazillion moving parts of people running here, running there. And then I will never, ever forget that first time that jet took off, when we felt that rumble. It was you're on a theme park ride, but even more intense. When you go like this, it's like that
also,
moment of...
There's more at stake, because on a theme park ride, at least you sort of know you're strapped in. We had a briefing about what happens if you go overboard, because people get blown off. And, not to overstate the frequency of that, but it was a serious briefing about the jet blast is so strong, you've got to be careful because you could get blown off.
Yeah. And then you just have someone's hand move on the back and just pull you back, and because then, the jet behind you was going to take off as well. But it just the sound and the heat, and some jets were worse than others. Did you find that too? Sometimes you got this...
Worse or better? Depends how
Well, just in terms of having that moment of where you had to stop and just let that heat pass, or turn your back, as they told us to do. Just turn your back towards the heat.
And what about once you're off the flight deck and the adrenaline's slowed a little bit and you finally get that glass of water or Coke or whatever it is you might have had, you can tell us, sitting around the table with all of the people on board, all of the sailors and the aviators, what was that like for you?
Whenever I sat down, and first of all, I had that nauseous feeling. So there was always that constant, you knew that you were on a ship, and that you just, and I think in that room where we ate, that was where you felt the waves more. But then, you'd sit down at a table and you had no idea of the rank of the person sitting next to you, but they all had a different story. And I loved asking them how long had they served for, what did they do? I mean, we sat next to a dentist what were the stats on how many...
I can't remember exactly, but he said he'd done far too many fillings than any of us thought was normal.
That's right, because people don't want to brush their teeth.
Because they're so busy on board. They sort of don't have time at the end of their shift to go and brush their teeth. So he said he was like chock-a-block with fillings, 3 root canals a week. Basically said he could do everything but orthodontics. And
you can see why, because... Let's talk about when we go to bed. So we finish our day, and we've had a wonderful adventure. We've been around with the captain. We've interviewed, the captain, and spent some time with him. And then we get taken to our accommodation. And
the Admiral Suite.
The Admiral Suite. So where I'm on the way to the Admiral Suite with my little suitcase, wheeling it down.
No, you're not wheeling it. You're going through little portholes.
That's right, yes.
You're carrying it. You're trying to climb through.
And look, we were tired as well, so we wanted to get to bed. But then we get to the Admiral Suite. What was your first impression when they opened up that door?
Honestly, my impression was that it was so much better than I was expecting.
Really?
Having been on the submarine last year, The sleeping quarters there was so much smaller, like a little frozen box. This was
luxury.
It was a bit like a luxury school camp. Luxury might be too much of a strong word.
We had an in-room sink.
And we had a
I was
minibar.
impressed by that. We did.
Do you
what
remember?
What was in the minibar?
Orange juice?
Sparkling orange juice.
And some snacks.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But it also had hotel services on this ship. So there was a little welcome note saying, you know, welcome aboard.
A towel.
Like a phone number you'd get if you checked into a hotel and you had an issue during the night. It was like, call this number at any time and someone will help you. We got robes, towels, thongs. What was that experience?
Why did we need
like?
the thongs?
For the showers.
Should we go there?
Look, I don't think anyone would be under the impression that the showers are the most impressive part of an aircraft carrier.
Yes.
They're not.
No.
But it's okay. It's all part of the
But
experience.
it was a bit of a surreal moment, I have to admit, when we get out of our clothes that just reek of fuel and we put on our navy blue robes that are like fluffy and I've got nothing on underneath my robe.
And I'm getting into the classified
I'm happy to share because I just remember, and I had my oversized thongs that didn't fit, so I've got nothing on but a robe in my oversized thongs and I'm scuffing my way.
And the ship has gone into night mode. Yeah. So when the ship goes into night mode, all the lights are out in the corridor.
Yes.
And there's just some red sort of flashing lights to help you orient yourself.
Yeah.
We've been given directions once on how to get to the shower. So luckily, we'd sort of learnt I guess it's kind of
like
interesting.
through the curtain, left, down,
The way they navigate around the ship is each room has sort of a code. And depending on what numbers are on the code, you can work out how far you are from each end of the ship.
Yeah.
And so I at least was trying to pay attention to the numbers getting higher and higher until we got to the one that signified the shower.
That's why you produce and I record, because I wasn't watching and I didn't know where I was going.
But we didn't get lost.
No, we didn't. And luckily we didn't because we had nothing on bar our robes and our oversized thongs. So then, we had, and then going to bed.
Quite nuts, really.
It was because the fighter jets were still doing night operations, so they were still taking off at full throttle.
That's it. So I'm lying in bed and below me is Dimity on a bunk and above me is just the roar and the rumble of the fiercest fighter jets in the world taking off and landing in the middle of the night.
What are you thinking?
Well, I'm actually thinking it's like I'm torn. I want to go to sleep because I know we have a big day tomorrow and I'm tired and I need my rest. But also, I'm never going to be in this situation again and I can't believe this is what we're hearing and I just want to have a moment to listen to it. But we didn't really get that because between the chatter and then just sleep. But it was one of those moments where you think to yourself, like, this is so strange and so different to anything you would normally experience. But also, I think thinking about this is how, it's fun to live like that for a day and for a night.
Yeah.
There are 5,000 people on board that ship
Yeah.
who live like that for months on end at a time. And they're not staying in the Admiral's suite. They're not getting hotel services.
Absolutely.
They're not getting a fluffy robe. So I think as much as I'm sure they'd like to, but I think that really hit home for me, and I know it did for you too, that it makes you realise, I guess, that the sort of lifestyle people live when they're at sea. And, I had always thought before assignments like this about like military sacrifice in terms of people going to war and maybe losing their life. But doing
the
something
simple things, isn't it?
Totally.
That every night where you would go into your room or you would go and have a meal. Like we went down to where majority of people on board eat their food, and it's it's one of those ones where you get the tray and you go along and you don't, no offense, but it was not the best looking food. Like they're feeding the masses, so
and it makes you think that there's actually a huge sacrifice that these servicemen and women make when they're not at war, when they're practicing, when they're on missions or exercises like this, just in the lifestyle that they're living, with you sort of you lose a lot of your freedom because you're not making decisions for yourself.
But you don't get any time away.
No
Remember
privacy.
when we had that
No
discussion?
privacy.
You were like, when you have a day off, what do? You go to the gym that's in the middle of the hangar.
With 15 other people.
And you go, or you just want to have a little moment to yourself where you're sitting in your little bunk, or you don't actually get, where do you go? Where do you go to just have 5 minutes of just, and I guess we saw that in Lieutenant Hunter Cultus, call sign Sugar Lips.
Sorry, what was the call sign?
Sugar Lips.
And was it appropriate?
It was definitely appropriate. And we'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute. But I guess you saw that in his interview. You know, like the minute I mentioned his family in the interview, he was overwhelmed with emotion. And it's not just being there physically with them, but all those little things of like where you eat, where you sleep. You just want your wife's meal. You know, you just want to give her a kiss goodnight. Who do you have that? You know, and I'm sure you would make some great mates, and the camaraderie would be, you know, very much there. But it's those little things, I think.
I think too, you know, you were talking about when do you ever get a moment to yourself. Sugar Lips revealed to us, to my great surprise, that his moment of peace was when he was flying in the fighter jet, not sort of in combat mode. But he said, I think you asked him, is it peaceful up there? And he said, yes, at times it's really peaceful. I pull out my notepad and I write a letter to my wife.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that's the last thing you'd think of a fighter pilot doing in the sky. But I think it just showed that, you know, the human side to that type of work as well.
And we should share that Sugar Lips was carefully cast in our story. We were given 4 options for a fighter jet pilot.
Why did you pick him?
Well, we had a lineup, and he just fit the real life maverick, I think. And the minute we spoke to him, we went, yep, absolutely, that's who we want to have, and, you know, in our story to play that. And he gives a really, I don't know, a bit of a fun side to that adventure, to the story, you know, and he brings that, and having that call sign was just perfect.
I think that's what sold us. As soon as we said, what's his call sign, and they said Sugar Lips, we were like, You're in.
You've got the job.
But I think what was good about him in terms of the storytelling was that he had all the charisma and the swagger and the confidence that you'd expect a fighter pilot to have. But then in his interview, he actually had a really soft side to him as well.
Substance.
He had substance. And I think that's sort of what we were trying to show, you know, beyond the adventure, this is a really serious story and these people are doing really serious, dangerous jobs. And they're sort of doing it for all of us.
And they're human too. That's the other thing. You know, they're human beings doing this, you know, and maybe when we look at that big overall military picture, we forget that sometimes, that there's, you know, they're mums and dads and brothers and sisters on board these ships and doing these jobs. But we also did some other really amazing things during the week.
What surprised you most about the whole experience?
On the ship or just
the whole
in
week?
General? Just to get that understanding, and I think to be able to just talk to the top brass and the people on the front line, like just being able to talk to the people and get a really good sense of who it is that makes these, you know, makes the sacrifice and does the job and why they do it, and the importance of it right now, especially in the Pacific region, and it's you could tell that it's on their minds. You know, what that Pacific region is and what's going on there, and the threat of China, and you know, they would see and read all about it, and then they're living it and they're talking about it and they're being briefed about it, no doubt. And it was definitely on front of mind for, I think, everyone we spoke to. That was the theme. The other side was the live fire. That was another really confronting experience, I think. It was, you know, we were right in there, as you saw.
How did you feel? So when we turned up and they had all the helmet and the vest and everything, and they strapped you all in, what did you think was coming?
Well, I've done stories before where you get into a helmet and you get into a vest and you get into your protective clothing, but I think I didn't expect to get so close.
Maybe
to
you
the
don't
live
then
fire.
run out into the range
and thank God for Sam. Major Sam was another person who we became really fond of. Is that a way to put it? He was really good, though. He gave us a great insight into all of the different nations that were there practicing together, because in that sort of situation, you know, the shooters from Ecuador weren't as good as the shooters from Tonga. But when you're in a situation, you have to learn there's language barriers. So we got a good insight into what it would be like on a battlefield when those nations have to come together and fight.
I think, too, with people like Major Sam, Otavio, I think was his surname, what really stood out to me was how proud they are of the work they do. You know, and it is, you sort of get caught up in, you know, like you can see that's, you know, a little boy's dream growing up.
And he just got that rank.
Yeah, he'd just been promoted, and you could tell that growing up that is the idea he probably had in his head of what it meant to be a Marine. But he was so proud to tell us how well they trained and, you know, how many times they'd done that run and all of that type of thing.
And I think that was a theme. That was a theme from everyone. I think everybody really enjoyed sharing what they did. They thought that, doing the 60 Minutes piece was a chance for them to showcase what they do.
Absolutely.
So everyone was very willing and couldn't do enough for us and got us involved and they got involved, which I think made a big difference. They were so keen to get involved and enlighten us as to what it's like in whatever they were doing.
What was your main takeaway?
Like the Admiral said, maybe not everybody knows or, has an interest in what's happening in the Pacific, but I think being engrossed in that, you realise just how important those waters are. How does it rate in terms of an assignment for you?
Really high.
Really high?
Really high, yeah, because it sort of has everything. Like, it has the sense of something different. It has the sense of, great characters in terms of storytelling, but there's also a really important story to it.
Yes.
So it's not sort of like some superficial, fun frolic off to explore, but there's a serious side to the story, but the process of telling it is really fun.
Well, thank you so much, Natty, and it was a great
Thank you.
assignment to do together, given we are also very good friends
Couldn't
as
agree
well as
more.
colleagues. And you can watch the story on the 60 Minutes Australia YouTube channel and also 9 Now. Thanks for joining us.